start going through the magic list, even though I don't realize you're not done. Alright, so now we need growth hormone. Let's go to thyroid stimulating hormone. What was the source?
Anterior pituitary.
The anterior pituitary. Again. The target of thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid, because the name tells you the answer. So thyroid stimulating hormone would go to my thyroid. Let's jump to the action. What do you think the action of thyroid stimulating hormone is? Stimulate the thyroid. If you don't like that word, you can say activate, turn on, grow, regulate. Pick a word that means stimulate in your head. So thyroid stimulating hormone stimulates your thyroid. That's the logic behind it. Type. Very good. In fact, you are going to write that so often that some students just say NSP for all of them. So nonsteroidal peptide is the most common chemical type. There's actually about 3 that aren't. So if you go on a test about NSP, I'll know what you mean. All right. Let's do adrenocorticotropic, or ACTH. Made where?
Anterior pituitary.
Again. On a test, just write that. Anterior pituitary, adrenal hypophysis. Where do you think adrenocorticotropic hormone goes? Adrenal cortex. Adrenocortico. Adrenal cortex, meaning the outer part of the adrenal gland. Can someone guess its chemical type for me? Just take a wild stab. NSP or nonsteroidal peptide. Okay, can you tell me what adrenocorticotropic hormone does? Stimulates the adrenal cortex, activates, regulates. In biology, tropic is sort of meaning to turn on or activate. So in English, adrenocorticotropic, tropic's my adrenocortico. Which one makes sense to a biologist? Okay, prolactin, made where? Take a stab. Anterior pituitary, again. Where's the target? Now say mammary glands, boobs, whatever. Pick one. I can pick lots of words. Right. All right. Type. NSP. Now, if you read Saladin closely or look online, some people argue that it's a protein. Okay, here's where life gets weird. In the Dark Ages, peptide, when I grew up in college, was anything that's larger than 1 amino acid. Because remember, biology 112, amino acids were monomers, and everything bigger was polymer. Some people will break this down further and go protein and peptide, and then some people will go oligopeptide and peptide. In this class, if it isn't an amino acid, it's a peptide. So for your choices, I'm lumping peptide as meaning protein, short peptide, big peptide, all peptides. So don't get mad at me when you read online, well, they say it's a protein. Proteins are peptides, right? So you can find a lot of people arguing about how big a peptide has to be a peptide. I'm just lumping them all together. So either you're 1 amino acid or you're not, is how I'm viewing this. But if you read different books, they'll use different language, like oligo or...
Which is monoamine.
Yes, monoamine is basically this, right? So if you read that it's a protein, that's cool because proteins are peptides. Make sense? I'm probably belaboring that too much. So action of prolactin. Yeah, pro in favor of lactin, I like milk, so make milk. Grow your boobs, whatever words you want there. Yes?
Do you want the milk to drop so it makes milk, but it's also what increases LH sensitivity?
You want to leave that one off for now. Because that won't mean a lot until we learn what the milk LH does. So for now, just do the milk focus. You're right. It does some other things. Okay, let's do luteinizing hormone, or LH. How about that? Anterior pituitary. And target? Ovaries and testes. So you can put ovary and testes. If you remember biology 112, you learned those words were called your gonads, meaning your sex organs. You can say ovary, testes. You can say sexy parts. I don't care. This is you. I don't care what you put up there. It's your study guide. I know the answer. Okay. Type. How about that? Right. NSP, nonsteroidal peptide. All right. Action of luteinizing hormone.
Ovulation.
Ovulation would be one of them. So regulate your sex, menstrual cycle, turns on, other. Just for now, since you haven't learned the reproduction, you can just say regulate your sex cycles would be fine on a test. Otherwise, I'll have to teach you the menstrual cycle to figure this out. Right. Ovulation, sex cycles, menstruation, sperm production. Spermy stuff. Let's do FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. Where's it made? How about that again? Okay, where's it go? Same as the one above it. Type is the same. Action, basically the same. So for this class today, there's not really any difference between FSH and LH till we learn more about them later. But they're basically sex hormones, they make you sex. Is that a real word? Okay, ADH, antidiuretic hormone. Made where?
Posterior.
We do not.
Okay.
No idea.
You have no foggy clue. Okay, let's go through it. Formally, the source is the hypothalamus. Because that's where it's made. It is released, though, from the posterior pituitary. So the posterior pituitary is releasing it, but it didn't make it. It actually made it in the hypothalamus. So on a test, if I ask source, you say hypothalamus. The pituitary is just where it comes out, but it's not made there. Okay, so that's a distinction. Let's figure out the target. The target of ADH. Kidneys. So it goes from my hypothalamus to my kidneys. Let's jump over to action. What do you think antidiuretic does?
Retain water.
Retain water. Because medical terminology, diuretics make you pee, antidiuretic means stop peeing. I stop peeing by holding water. Right? So stop pee, your stop pee hormone. What type is it?
Peptide.
Nonsteroidal peptide. Even though we changed glands, we're still dealing with NADH primarily. Oxytocin or OT, made where? Hypothalamus, because it's released from the posterior pituitary, or neurohypophysis. But it's made in the hypothalamus. By the way, that's how the chart works. They're all grouped together. So, target of oxytocin. Uterus and mammary glands are the two big ones. Okay, let's do type. Tends to be an NSP. Again, some people will argue a little different there. What's the function of oxytocin?
Labor
Contraction.
Contract, contract, contract. We call it the cuddling hormone, we call it the squirting hormone, squirt out milk, squirt out baby, squirt out semen. It basically causes things to contract. So you release the milk, you release the baby, you want to cuddle with someone afterwards. Okay. So contraction is fine. Yeah, it's a weird little one. As I'm a pervy biologist, I know. Okay, I'm going to scroll this up so we can do the rest of that. All right, on this page.
I mean, let's be honest. Why do you forget sex? Sorry.
Excellent point.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we remember. Why we use it in marketing.
All right, let's go now to thyroid hormones. So be careful on your list. If you go up to the second line, you have thyroid stimulating hormone. It's a very different beast than thyroid. That S makes a huge difference in your answer. So thyroid hormones, T3, T4, are made where? In the thyroid. So TSH is made in my pituitary, but thyroid, just T's, are made in my thyroid gland. So there's a difference between those two. So what is the target of the thyroid hormones?
This is all tissues.
All tissues. Just say all. Everywhere. All over is a perfect good answer. Systemic is doctor word for it. So everywhere is a perfectly legitimate statement. It goes all over the place. Well, why? Let's go to action. What does it do that needs to go everywhere? Metabolism.
Heart rate, respiration, appetite.
Very good. So if we go back to biology 112, there are 3 letters that stood for metabolism. Began with an A, ended with a P.
ATP.
That's right. What did ATP mean?
Adenosine triphosphate.
Very good. Or in English, energy, right? Which I can't spell. So in English, thyroid hormones regulate your energy use. You're burning calories, you're not burning calories. You're using energy, you're not. So where do you do that? Muscle, bone, brains. Every place you saw the word ATP in your life was one of these. It's controlling the cell's ability to do that. So, type. Very good. Nonsteroidal amine. So it's a nonsteroidal amine. So again, you'll have people call it a monoamine, catecholamitic derivative. We're just going to call it an amino acid or an amine.
Can we say NSA on that?
I would accept that, because I understand what the NSA is in this context. Right. So nonsteroidal amino group, nonsteroidal amine, amino acid derivative, they all mean the same thing. It's a nonsteroidal. Okay, calcitonin. You learned that last term, so this should be reviewed. Also made in your thyroid gland, just different spot. What was the target of calcitonin? Can you be more specific?
Cells.
You had blasts and clasts.
Osteoclasts.
Oh, good. So your osteoblasts tended to be the
Build.
receivers, and they build bone. So what did it do to the calcium in your blood, though? That's right. So it lowered the blood calcium and put that into my bone, right? So depending which book you read, people say it raises bone calcium, or you'll read lowers blood calcium. Those are the same thing, right? I took it from my blood and put it in my bone.
Paladin uses blood or bone deposition.
Bone deposition's a $200 word for that. Yeah. What type is it?
Peptide.
So I'm going to write NSP, nonsteroidal peptide. Most common one. So where are you going to learn this? Learn the ones that aren't the peptides. And then everybody else just follow them. Okay. Let's do our parathyroid hormone. Again, a review from last term. It's made where? In the parathyroid gland. It targets the osteoclasts, primarily. It must be an NSP, because that's all I'm going to write a bunch of times. And the question is, what did it do?
Breaks down.
So it raises your blood calcium, and did that by lowering the bone calcium, right? Took it out of your bones to give it to your blood. Vaguely ring a bell? Remember grandma and her osteoporosis? So, now we're going to have a group called mineral corticoids. There's actually a bunch of them. The one everyone talks about is this word in parentheses, aldosterone. That's the main one. That's what you'll hear. So, where are your mineral corticoids made?
Your liver.
Adrenal cortex. So the word cortico means adrenal cortex in sort of regular speak. So adrenal cortex makes the mineral corticoids or aldosterone.
Oh, is kidneys the target?
In this case, yes it is. Kidney is the target. Because what's the job of a mineral corticoid? What does aldosterone do? Very good. Reabsorb sodium and secrete potassium. So what they're telling your kidneys to do is to suck the salt out of your pee, sodium, and secrete the potassium into your pee. So they tell the kidneys what to do with sodium and potassium. Reabsorb sodium back in, secrete potassium back out. So now, type.
Steroid.
They are a steroid. And we use that in big red underline. That's your first of the steroid types. All right, so let's go down to glucocorticoids. From the name, they're made where? Adrenal cortex. Again. Cortico. Okay, target.
Most tissues.
Most tissues will say all. That works for me. All over.
Tissue?
Yeah, all over the body, systemic, most places, kind of all over the place. Because what do they do? What's the action of glucocorticoids? Raises blood glucose. So increase sugar use. And we're going to add a few magic words here. During stress. So they raise your sugar use during stress. I'm going to add the big word for your exam. Another word I could have thrown in there is the sympathetic response. So cortisol increases your sympathetic response. Fight or flight, that kind of thing. So when you got stressed out during your exam, your cortisol levels went up. You're getting stressed out. Let's do type.
Steroid?
It's a steroid. Again? All right, I see a pattern developing here. Let's do our androgens, which are sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, all those. Where are they made?
Gonads.
Gonads is a legit word, meaning sexy parts.
And adrenal gland.
And adrenal gland, and adrenal cortex. So this place has two sources. Your testes and ovaries make them, mostly, but we also get our adrenal cortex makes them. So sometimes we call adrenal androgens. Okay, where do sex hormones go? Sexy parts, also all over. Right? I shave every day because I have testosterone that hits my face. Not literally, right? Right? So all over sexy parts, what do you want to call them? What type are they? Take ye a guess.
Steroids.
They are steroids. We're going to stop there and realize the steroids are all from the same location, which is
Adrenal cortex.
bingo. Adrenal cortex, or your gonads, all have the same chemistry. They're all steroidal. There's another little trick. This may or may not help you. If I write out all these hormones in their formal names, so I'll do that. I have aldosterone. I have cortisone. I have testosterone. What? Hey! Progester. What? Bingo. If they end in "-one", they're a steroid. So aldosterone, cortisone, testosterone. The only one that falls flat on it is estrogen. But you will see people refer to estrogenerone. Yeah, but it's not estrogen. Estrogen just falls flat. But most of them have an "-one" ending. Hydrocortisone. So if you see an "-one", or if you see adrenal cortex as the source, you're going to write steroidal. Okay, let's do androgens again. So we've left off on their action, their target, their effect. What are they for?
Sexy times.
Sexy stuff. Make sex. Make you sexy. All right.
Yeah.
Secondary sex characteristics, sexual cycles, puberty, babies. Pick a word. Right. As long as you know about sex. Ask your mother. No, never mind. Okay, let's do epinephrine. So you learn that in the autonomic system as a neurotransmitter, it also exists as a hormone. But this thing is pretty much the same. So where is epinephrine from?
Adrenal medulla.
Adrenal medulla. All right. Which means the middle part. So still the adrenal gland, but at different parts, we call it a different source. So these top three here were adrenal cortex. Epinephrine's adrenal medulla. Different spots. Okay, where does epinephrine go? Where?
All over.
Kind of all over, hard especially, but we'll do all over. It's systemic, everywhere, whatever word you want to use there. Type.
NSA.
NSA. Because it's an amino acid or amine or a monoamine. We're going to say NSA, nonsteroidal amine. So even though it's coming from the adrenal gland, it's not coming from the cortex. Therefore, it's not a steroid. Okay? It's an amine because it has an "-ine" ending. Okay, what's the job of epinephrine?
I think it's sympathetic.
Yeah, sympathetic again. So again, fight or flight, increased speed. Used to be calling adrenaline was the old word. So adrenaline, fight or flight, increased heart rate.
So, can you say excitatory?
Yes, you can. Again, those. But wait, there's more. Turn the page. Now we gotta do these. Insulin. Insulin is made where?
Pancreas.
Pancreas. That's not good enough because PCC said you have to know more. The islets, and there's supposed to be actually another one. Beta cell. So on this one on a test, you have to tell me the beta cells of the pancreatic islet.
What?
Because that's what thou shalt know, because everyone in the U.S. is diabetic, so you might as well know that part.
Beta cell of the pancreas.
The beta cell of the pancreatic islets, or the pancreatic islet beta cells, or the islets of Langerhans is a fancy way to say it. But don't just say pancreas, because I'm going to yell at you like which part of the pancreas. So just break it down. Right? So, what is the target of insulin?
Everything.
Kind of all over, right? All cells. Primarily the liver, but also affects most body cells. What type is it? And an SP. Again, you'll have people argue, well, it's a protein or not, but it's still a nonsteroidal peptide type. Then, the question is, what's it do? Lowers your blood sugar. Lowers your blood sugar. Another way Saladin talks about it. He says it increases sugar absorption into the cells. He's saying the same thing, right? If I put it in my cells, I take it out of my blood. So just like the PTH and the calcitonin, there's different ways you can say the same thing. I learned lowers blood sugar. I just remember, well, it lowers it by putting it into my body. Insulin puts it in. Insulin puts it in. Tell me about glucagon. Where be it made? Say
Beta cells of the pancreas.
the pancreatic islet. It's the alpha cells. The way you keep this straight is G comes before I, A comes before B. So the alpha cell is glucagon, the beta cell is insulin. Does that help? That's how I remember it. Alpha before beta, G before I. So where does glucagon go?
To the liver.
Primarily liver. What type is it?
NSP.
NSP, that's all I ever write, all right? What's the job of glucagon? Increases blood sugar. And so I'm going to say it lowers liver reserves. Because he has to write it big. All right. But it takes it out of my liver and puts it into my blood. Just like taking it out of my bone, putting it into my blood. Same logic. When your gluca is gone, you use glucagon. That's how we remember it. Your gluca is gone. Okay, melatonin. Source.
Pineal gland.
Pineal body, pineal gland, pineal structure. It was on so many quizzes ago. Target.
Brain.
The brain. So it actually kind of makes a loop and goes back to where it came from. It is a what?
Amine.
It's an NSA. It's an amino acid formally. And what's its job?
Sleep-wake cycles.
Sleep and wake cycles.
What's that in the book?
They probably say circadian cycle.
Say mood and
No,
sexual
they say it's like an
maturation.
unknown function, and they think it's sort of like.
We don't know what it does.
I've learned
Well, the
that
book
it's
has gotten several
like-
from
Yeah.
at this point.
He's hedging his bet. In every other mammal but people, if you give them melatonin, they go to sleep. That's kind of how animals know it's fall, winter, or spring. Breeding seasons. It actually works in people, but not as clearly. So they tend to hedge your bet. But it makes you wake up, fall asleep. The reason you're depressed because it's wintertime is because of that. Because you want to go to sleep. Yeah.
He argues that it's like the most ancient version of the eye. So it's
Yes.
like the first eye.
Yes, in fact, in reptiles, their pineal body is actually in their forehead. They can sense light through it. Yours moves back. You can't. So what happened? Where the should your two optic nerves actually send the nipples directly to the pineal to tell it what the sunlight's doing because they can't see it on sun. That's one of your reptilian types. Okay, so picking up something else.
You said that it's, melatonin is more effective in animals as opposed
It's clear. If you give them melatonin, they just, pretty much. In you give melatonin, some people sleep, some people just wonder what you did. And it's hard to say why, but, hibernation for a bear, that's up high. That's part of it. Breeding season, why some animals breed in fall or spring is they can detect the light levels.
They say it works better with kids who have ADD.
It seems to, but again, why?
Helps them sleep.
Okay, so let's do our last one, then we'll go through some of these questions. The atrial natriuretic peptide, or ANP. I'll do the easy part. What type is it, say ye?
ANP.
So that's just a peptide, right? So you don't have to worry about that. But let's go back. Where do you think atrial natriuretic peptide is made?
Heart.
In the heart. The atria is your heart. Where does it go? Say kidney.
Kidney.
And what does it do there?
Limits appetite over long term.
Well, what the book says.
True.
Increases.
Yep. So it decreases sodium absorption. So in other words, you get rid of your sodium, you pee more sodium, and therefore you do the reverse with potassium. So it's the opposite of aldosterone. Okay. So let's go through then this question down below here. What hormones are steroidal? There were 3. What were they? So we have aldosterone, mineralocorticoids. We have cortisone, which was a glucocorticoid. And we have things like testosterone, which were a androgen. They all came from where? Adrenal cortex. So if you come from an adrenal cortex, you are a steroid. That is the rule that you will follow. That's also a one. That doesn't mean that you go there. It's that your source is the adrenal cortex. Now what we have to do is figure out this difference in function thing. Why? Who? Other than biologists, who gives a rip that they come from your adrenal cortex? Right? So let me show you a picture for biology 112 that you don't remember anything from anyway. This seems to be the way it goes. Where did I lose the color of that picture? Ah! I'll show you a little video here. It's a tad grainy because I blew it up wrong, so you have to bear with me here. I'll show you a video which is much better. Okay, this is showing, to get your bearings, this is a nucleus down here. Cell membrane here, that's a hormone up there. Right? So, what do you notice about the hormone? Where's it going? Into the cell, and then into the... That's what makes it a steroid. Steroids, remember, biology 112, are lipid-based, or they're fat. Fat can go into your nucleus because it goes right through the phospholipid bilayer. So a steroid hormone can go directly into my DNA, down here, and mess me up. Right? So that's called a direct action. They go directly into my nucleus and directly affect my gene expression. So steroids directly affect you. Right?
Is that why we love coffee so much?
Could be that. I don't know. This is why you can put a cream of cortisone on your skin and it soaks in. It's fat-based, so it can just soak right in every cell. So cortisone cream, hydrocortisone cream. They're lipid-based. They're hydrophobic. Okay. So let me show you the other one. If they're a non-steroid, yeah, cut off my little molecule. For some reason, there should be a little picture up in the corner. Where does my hormone, which you can't see off the screen, where's it go? To a receptor in the membrane. It doesn't go to my nucleus. Why not? Why doesn't it go down there? Because it's hydrophobic, right? I'm sorry, hydrophilic. It can't go through the fat. It's water-based. So if I'm made of water, I can't go through the fat. Therefore, I have to bind to a receptor, and that receptor talks to the nucleus. That's called an indirect pathway, or a secondary pathway. So the difference between steroids and non-steroids is steroids can go into my nucleus, non-steroids cannot. And thus you need a receptor to that. So let's go back to our magic picture here. Now I'll show you the animation. What's this mean in terms of function and action? Yes?
So does this mean that the receptor takes it to the, just inside the cell, or does it take it to the nucleus?
Both. Depending on which receptor it is. So steroids. Direct action. And why do we call it direct action? So
Right in the cell.
that's right. So it goes directly into my cell. It goes right into my cell because it's fat-based. So direct action. If I'm a non-steroid, we call it indirect, or sometimes called secondary, because
Because they have to use a receptor to
you
communicate.
have to use a receptor.
Are you making this to question number 2?
Question 1.
Question, still on question 1.
Yes. Direct hormone function. So, so non-steroidals have to bind to a receptor before they can get in the cell. Steroids do not. So I'm going to show you.
Do they actually enter the cell then, or does the receptor
No.
signal
The
the cell?
receptor has to signal downstream. So let me show you an animation of this, since I know you love that so. Which one should I show you first? Oh, I'll do steroids. So here's McGraw-Hill's version of steroids. Here we go.
Steroid hormones are not water-soluble.
Or aka lipid-based, hydrophobic, took a word, right?
They travel in the blood attached to protein carriers. When steroid hormones arrive at their target cells, they dissociate from their protein carriers and pass through the plasma membrane of the cell. Some steroid hormones bind to specific receptor proteins in the cytoplasm and then move as a hormone receptor complex into the nucleus.
So let's look at that carefully for just a second. If you notice, it binds to receptor, right? That's not on the outside of the cell. That's once it's in. So that doesn't change what happened. I can still enter the cell at will and cause something to happen. So there could be receptors for steroids, but they're not on the surface of the cell. You don't need them. They're within the cell. Right? So
Specific receptor proteins in the cytoplasm and then move as a hormone receptor complex into the nucleus.
There you go.
Other steroids travel directly into the nucleus before encountering their receptor proteins, not shown.
Of course not.
The hormone receptor protein, activated by binding to the hormone, is now able to bind to specific regions of the DNA. These DNA regions are known as the hormone response elements.
Of course.
The binding of the hormone receptor complex has a direct effect on the level of transcription at that site. Messenger RNA, mRNA, is produced, which then codes for the synthesis of specific proteins.
So in English, it goes through my cell membrane into my nucleus, tells my DNA to do something. Make me a boy, whatever. Right? So direct action, they call it. So now, these are non-steroids now.
When a signal molecule, such as epinephrine,
Hey, epinephrine. If you look on your chart, that was a what? A non-steroidal amine. So it's something that can't pass through the cell. So there's my cell.
binds to a cell surface receptor protein, it activates a G protein on the inside of the cell.
And that's the key difference, is that hormone can't get in, so I bind a receptor. That receptor turns on something inside, like knocking on a door. Yeah.
This might be a ridiculous question, but
Sure.
so why doesn't the body make more steroids if they go directly in? Wouldn't it be easier if they just use steroids for most things?
It would.
They use NSPs or whatever for most things.
You know, I didn't diligence, so I mean, that's a hard question. Yeah.
So like, so then you can control what
Right, in
comes in
some
and out of the
ways,
cell.
the joy of a steroid is that's harder to deal with. If you go right in, there's no way I can stop you. Right? With non-steroidal, you have that receptor, and that receptor then can choose to turn on or turn off.
Checks and balances.
It's like that down-regulation, up-regulation of addiction. You know, I can control what receptors, and so I have a little bit more say. But you're right, steroids would be more effective. They just go right in. So, but that's a key difference. I have receptors and things to do here.
The G protein then stimulates adenylyl cyclase to produce large amounts of cyclic AMP from ATP within the cell.
So in English, we're turning things on inside the cell once I bind to the receptor.
Cyclic AMP then binds to and activates a target protein, such as alpha kinase, which adds phosphates to specific proteins in the cell.
In English, I'm changing stuff inside my cell.
The effect of this phosphorylation depends on the identity of the cell and the proteins that are phosphorylated.
In English, it depends. Key difference, that epinephrine is still on the outside of the cell. It did not go in, it's still bound to a receptor. This is called a secondary messenger system, or indirect, also called a G protein system. There's lots of words for this. Key idea, steroids went in, they don't. Yes, Josh?
So steroids can change DNA, but non-steroids can't.
Well, they can, but not directly. They would turn on something that would eventually do your DNA. But the steroid itself goes in and changes transcription. Yes.
Is this another reason why sympathetic response is harder to undo?
In some ways, because it directly affects, all these receptors, and you turn on all this stuff, and then you got to unturn on all this stuff.
So you have receptors, do you ever have like channels? Does
Yes.
a receptor ever open and let it in?
Not normally, but what will happen, like in your kidney, once the ADH will bind, then you start opening channels in the kidney to let the sodium